I wanted to share a story with you today about one of the most famous presidents the United States has ever had, President John F. Kennedy. If you're familiar with President John F. Kennedy, you would know that he served at a very consequential time in our nation's history. There was a lot of turmoil going on in our country, and our country needed a strong leader that could guide us through some of the tumultuous political climates that were going on, the Cuban Missile Crisis, putting people on the moon. This was a very pivotal time in our nation's history, and as the president, it required him in his office to be able to have good relationships with a lot of people. How many of you guys know you cannot be president if you are not a person that has some ability to influence people? You need to be able to have difficult conversations. You need to be able to know what to do when it's not always clear what to do. I can't tell you how stressful it would be to be a president. Have you ever seen those pictures of the guys when they come into office on the first day and then when they leave? And they've been in there for like 8 years, but it looked like they've been in there for 80, you know what I'm talking? They got some city miles on their face, you know what I mean? They go in looking like Brad Pitt, they come out looking like Tommy Lee Jones. It's not kind. It's not kind to them in that office. It's difficult because you're constantly having to have difficult conversations and make difficult decisions and know what to do in the heat of a moment and face pressure and backlash and all of these things. And John F. Kennedy served at a difficult time in our nation's history where we're doing things we had never done before. We're interacting with neighboring countries that have access to weapons that could hurt us. We're putting people in outer space and walking on the moon and all of these things. And he's leading in this time, and I can't imagine how many people he had to negotiate with, how many people he had to communicate with, how many people he had to know, how many people he had to keep track of, how many decisions he needed to make. I can't imagine some of the conversations that took place in the Oval Office. I can't imagine some of the screaming matches that happened on the phone with foreign leaders. I can't imagine the tension that he felt in some of those conversations. I can't imagine the people that showed up that pretended like they were friends but really weren't. It would be a difficult position for any of us to be in. Could we acknowledge that today? Difficult position, but the interesting thing for me is that there's a lot of photographs of JFK at this time interacting with world leaders. There's a lot of pictures of him in the Oval Office having meetings with important people, making important decisions, having important conversations, signing important documents. But there's one picture that has always stood out to me when it comes to the president in that season of his life. And it is a picture of his son, John F. Kennedy Jr., playing under the Resolute desk as his father works. This is a beautiful picture because his dad is the president of the United States, the most powerful man on earth. I got no clue what papers he's looking at in that moment, but can I just surmise that they're probably important? If they made it to his desk, can we just guess that those are probably some big decisions that he's got to make? Yet somehow, some way, his son is still underneath the desk that holds the most important documents in our nation, and he's playing at the feet of his father. His son is not aware of the Cuban Missile Crisis. His son is not aware that we are in a race with Russia to put man on the moon. His son is not aware of some of the difficult decisions that he is having to make, the racial tension that existed in our country at that time, all of the things that seemed like they were within a hair's breadth of falling apart. All his son knew was, I am sitting at my dad's feet under my dad's desk playing with my father. And it's a different conversation that his son is having than the other people that are in the Oval Office at the time. When other people come in, they're having a different experience with that president. They are in a different position on that desk. Nobody else is climbing under the desk and playing at the president's feet. Are you with me? Everybody else is standing across the desk. They are separate. The desk is a barrier between them and the president. Everybody else is standing there dignified and formal, but his son is standing there familiar and intimate. Can I tell you today, there is a difference between access and intimacy. There were a lot of people that had access to the president, that had access to the Oval Office, that had access to his ear, that had access to his telephone, that had access to his conversation, but there were few people that possessed the intimacy that his son possessed in that room. See, many people knew the president, but only one knew him as father. Can I tell you today that there is a difference between access and intimacy? There is a difference between being in conversation with somebody and being in communion with them. You can be in the room with somebody and still not know them beyond the superficial. You can have interactions and never have intimacy. There's a lot of us, we have relationships in our life that are superficial. Have you ever had a superficial relationship before? Where I knew you on the surface, where I was friendly with you, where I was cordial with you, where I knew details about your life, but I didn't really know you deeply. And how many of us can understand that the meaningful relationships in our life are the relationships where we move past the superficial and we get into a place of intimacy, where we get into a place of substance, where we get into a place of depth. And I believe that God has given us a desire in all of our hearts for intimacy. Every person in this room, you have a desire for intimacy. You have a desire to know somebody and be truly known by somebody. You have a desire to have a deep and meaningful connection with somebody that transcends something superfluous. You want to get in and know somebody's heart. You want them to know your heart. Anybody in here, you want to be like, you just raise your hand, you're like, man, I want meaningful and deep connections with people. Can I see some hands across this room? We all want that. We all have this God-given desire in all of our hearts for intimacy. That's why the picture of JFK Jr. is so special. That's why when I put it up on the screen, everybody in this room, you guys had an emotional response to that picture. Many of you, you audibly said, oh. Why? Because when we look at that picture, there's something about that picture that causes all of us to feel this sense of joy, this sense of closeness, where all of us, we can project ourselves onto that little boy's face. It perfectly captures the purity of the intimacy between a father and son. And there's many of us in here today, we see that picture and it takes us back to a time when there was somebody in our lives that was close enough to us where we could sit at their feet. Where there was a grandmother, where there was an aunt, where there was an uncle, where there was a father, where there was a mother, where there was a sibling, where there was a close family friend that we were close enough to, that we trusted enough, that loved us enough that they would invite us even when things were busy. They weren't going to shoo us out of the office. They were going to allow us, no matter how important the papers were on the desk, they were going to allow us to come and to just sit with them in a way and experience them in a way that nobody else could possibly experience them. Can I tell you today that you were not created for superficial connection. You were created for communion. You were created for intimacy. The reason why you're here is to have deep and meaningful connection, to have communion, to have intimacy. Can I tell you that that's why many of us, we wonder why we're here, because we're starving for lack of intimacy. There's many people in here, and you get to this point where you're like, why am I here? A lot of times when we get to the place where we ask, why am I here? It's because we're starving for lack of intimacy. We don't have any deep connections in our life. Everything is superficial, and when everything is superficial, we begin to starve. When everything is surface level, there's no substance. And so for many of us in this room, we start to feel alone. We start to feel isolated, we start to feel disconnected, we start to feel discouraged because we don't have any relationship that has substance to it. And you were not created to exist in the superficial. You were not created to exist on a surface level connection with people. You were created for something deeper. You were created for communion. The reason why you're here on this planet is so that you could find communion. When I think about this picture, I think about the intimacy of a father and a son gathered around a desk. And it connects it to another famous image of people sitting at a table that all of you would recognize. And that's the image of Da Vinci's Last Supper. When we think about communion, this is the picture that pops up in our head, isn't it? It's arguably one of the most famous images in the world. It is probably one of, if not the most recognizable image that has ever been created in all of human history. And when we think about the word communion, this is what we think about. But can I tell you today, I want us to deconstruct our expectation of what communion looks like. Because I think that some of the problems with the level of intimacy and communion we're able to discover is how we define intimacy and communion. Are you with me today? There were a lot of people that probably went into the Oval Office that felt like they had a close connection with the president until they realized that there was a little boy that was closer than they were. Are you with me? Can I tell you that when we look at this image, we might think we know what it means to partake in communion with Christ. But can I tell you that we need to break that down, because sometimes we allow tradition, we allow expectation, we allow what we already know to influence our understanding of what it means to be in communion. Can I tell you today, this is not what communion looked like in Jesus' day. In Jesus' time, they would have laid on the ground around a low table, and it was customary to lay on your left-hand side, supported on your left arm, and eat with your right hand. And communion would have looked a lot more like this. That's a completely different experience. It was closer and more intimate than we are used to imagining. They were close enough to touch. Can I tell you, this is an important distinction, and we're gonna dive in this today, because this is a lot different than the previous image, isn't it? This is a lot different. And can I tell you today, like I can imagine myself very easily sitting at the table like they were in the Last Supper with anybody. To sit like this with people, I gotta be close to you for me to be laying around a table with you like this, okay? I'm a dude, you know? I gotta be close with you. I gotta really know who this person is for me to reach that level of comfort, that level of connection with somebody, where we're going to be in that sort of a setting where we are lounging around together. Lounging implies that we are comfortable with one another. Are you with me today? And so I want you, when we go through and we think about communion, I want you to keep this image in your head instead of the other one as we look at a passage of Scripture that a lot of times we don't look at when we think about communion. See, we see the Last Supper appear in different passages throughout Scripture, and a lot of times we go to Luke or maybe some of the other Gospels, but what I want us to do is look at communion through the lens of the book of John. This is whenever I've talked about communion in my entire ministry, I've never used the book of John to talk about communion, but I want us to look at the book of John and how it lays it out. And I'm reading out of the New King James Version today, which I don't normally do, but it is worded in a way that is very similar to the original language, and I want us to understand what's actually going on here. So in John chapter 13, starting in verse 21, this is at the Last Supper. Jesus had just washed the disciples' feet, and he is telling them about things to come. And it says in verse 21, it says, when Jesus had said these things, he was troubled in his spirit, and he testified and said, most assuredly, I say to you, one of you will betray me. Then the disciples looked at one another, perplexed about whom he spoke. Now there was, listen to this is the crazy part, leaning on Jesus' chest, one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. This guy is leaning up against Jesus' chest. It says, then Simon Peter, therefore, because of his proximity to Jesus, because of how close he is to Jesus, Simon Peter, therefore, mentioned to him to ask who it was of whom he spoke. This is wild to me, because they're all sitting around the same table. Simon Peter had the same level of access that John had, but he understood that because John was closer to Christ, he had a different level of intimacy with him. Are you with me? That he had a different relationship with him. He understood that I can ask this question, but I want to go through somebody else because they have a different connection. They're more intimate. He can ask this question of Jesus because he is closer to him. Can I tell you that I want to be the type of person today that isn't just in the room with Jesus. I want to be the type of person that is so close to Jesus that I can speak for him. I want to be the kind of person that is so close to Jesus that other people say, because of your proximity, because of your intimacy, because of your relationship with him, I need to know more about his heart. I need to know more about what's going on in his mind. I want to be the type of person that other disciples will come to and say, hey, can you pray for me? Because there's something about when you pray that God shows up in. And I think all of us should want that too. All of us should want that too. It says in verse 25, then leaning back on Jesus' chest, he said to him, Lord, who is it? This is a grown man leaning up on another grown man's chest. This sounds crazy to me. Jesus answered, it is he whom I shall give a piece of bread when I have dipped it. And having dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. This is a wild version for us to read about communion because we experience it from a 21st century Western lens with our formal dining rooms and our chairs and our silverware. How many people in your house, you have a formal dining room? Can I see some hands? Like you got a breakfast nook over there, but then you also have a formal dining room. When guests come over, we eat there. And my family, we eat at the little ratchet Walmart table that wobbles for breakfast. But when people come over, we sit at that table, and we don't sit there unless there's people coming over. We use that table for Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving. Like that's the formal, that's how we think about the Last Supper, that it was formal, that it was dignified, that everybody's sitting there on their chairs and they've got their salad forks, you know? And they've got 3 spoon options, and you have to use this one for dessert, and you use this one for the soup, and we're gonna bring out the different plates, and this is how we conceptualize meals. Can I tell you that meals mean something different in Eastern culture than they do in Western culture? Anybody grow up in an Eastern culture before? Or grew up as a young person in Eastern culture? Meals are different. I grew up in an Eastern culture, and I understand like the way that you approach meals are different. In the West, meals are about convenience, nutrition, culinary excellence, experience. When you guys choose where you're gonna go for lunch after service, you're thinking, I wanna go somewhere that has good food. I wanna go somewhere with some good ambiance. I wanna go somewhere where the servers are gonna take care of me. I wanna go somewhere that's gonna be in line with my diet. I wanna go somewhere that is affordable. I wanna go somewhere that is fine. Can I tell you that's not the way that they think about meals in Eastern culture? In the East, meals were about acceptance, they're about trust, they're about honor, they're about communion. Where I grew up, if there was ever a guest pastor that came to our church in the culture I grew up in, everybody in church would fight for the honor and the privilege of having that guest pastor come to their house. Why? Because it wasn't about the formal dining room. It wasn't about the culinary excellence. It was about the honor. For them, it was like, it's an honor for me. In America, if you invite somebody over your house, you're like, I'm doing you a favor. You know what I mean? Like, I wanna do something for you. In Eastern culture, it's like, do something for me. Like you coming over and me cooking for you, me preparing for you, and me putting this on for you, and me hosting you, it's an honor for me because it shows that I mattered enough for you to come and share a meal with me. There's a different perspective around communion. That's why when Jesus ate with people that were considered of ill repute, who Jesus ate with was scandalous because the table was relational and not functional. That's why when Jesus ate with prostitutes and tax collectors, the religious people freaked out because it's not functional to share a meal together. Hey, we're not just going to Quiznos and grabbing lunch or going down to Chipotle and grabbing a bowl together. Like it's not just something that we do just because we gotta eat. Listen, when you shared a meal with somebody in Eastern culture, it was you saying, I'm a friend of yours. I care about you. I value you. I see you. I recognize you. And I want to get to know you better. I wanna build a connection with you. I wanna build a bond with you. That's why religious people freaked out, because when Jesus is getting a meal with a tax collector, they're not sitting across a long table in a dining room. They are lounging together. They are close to one another. They are comfortable with one another. Jesus is getting comfortable around people that society says you shouldn't be comfortable around. You got to be dignified around them. You got to put up barriers around them. You can't get close to them because they're not worthy. But Jesus showed up anyways. And Jesus left his divinity aside and put on the form of a man and came down and got alongside sinners and said, I choose you. I welcome you. I invite you in. And the religious people freaked out. Why? Because it wasn't functional, it was relational. And Jesus was inviting people into relationship with him that the dignified people said you should have no part of. And Jesus wants to have a relationship with you today. Do you realize that? At the end of the Bible, in Revelation chapter 3, verse 20, Jesus says, look, I stand at the door and knock. If you hear my voice and you open the door, I will come in and we will share a meal together as friends. It is wild that God would want to share a meal with me as my friend. That he wants to come in and have communion with me. That he wants to come in and have relationship with me. Am I talking to anybody else that thinks this is absolutely crazy that a holy God would stand at the door of my heart saying, hey, would you let me come in? I want to get comfortable with you. I want to be intimate with you. I want to be connected to you. I want to be in communion with you. I want to share a meal with you as your friend. There is a manner in which we are meant to share a meal with Christ as friends. That's how we're supposed to share a meal with him. Are you with me today? Not rigid and uncomfortable, but relaxed and intimate. And there's many of us that go into our relationship with God so formal that we can't be relational. We come into a relationship with God where we're very rigid and we've got our rules and we've got our suits and our ties and our ways of being and we've got our processes and we have our systems and our structures and all of these things, and we come to God thinking that these things are what make the meal special, and God is telling us, no, what makes the meal special is when we can just sit down together and be comfortable, where you can lean up against me while you eat and we can have a conversation, where you can hear my heartbeat, where you can know my thoughts, where we can be connected one to another. That's what communion looks like. Are you with me today? You were created to commune with God. You were created to be connected to God. You were created to be in a place of intimacy with God. That's what you were created for. Jesus is standing at the door of your heart, knocking, saying, hey, I want to come in. I want us to sit together as friends. You ever have somebody that just got weird with you and like you've known them for a long time and they start getting like really rigid and you're like, what are you doing? Why are you saying sir? You know? We've known each other since middle school. Why are you talking to me? Why are you talking to me like you don't know me? I want to share a meal with you. Can't we just hang out like we used to? Can't we just be close together like we used to? This is what God wants with us, to be close with us, to be intimate, to be in communion with us. And can I tell you today that you can sit at the table and still not be in the right position? Are you listening to me this morning? We look at the seating arrangement. See, the Bible doesn't tell us where everybody sat, right? Like there's no event planner. There weren't little cards sitting at the table that the Bible tells us where somebody sat. But we can surmise by the way the conversation goes where Judas, Peter, John, and Jesus sat. And what seems to be the most logical and the most apparent is that Jesus was sitting at the place that the host would sit, and Judas was sitting immediately to his left, John was sitting immediately to his right, and then Peter appears to be sitting to the other side of John. And what's interesting to me about this layout is that in Eastern culture, there were traditions on where you sat at a table. So in Western culture, a lot of times the most important person will sit at the head of the table, as an example. In Eastern culture, a lot of times they sat at round tables, or oval tables rather. So there wasn't even necessarily a head the way that we would consider it, but you would have the place of the host. And then culturally, the most significant place to sit was at the left hand of the host. The left hand of the host was considered the place of honor. And so we see Judas sitting at the left hand of Jesus. The Bible doesn't tell us why he's sitting at the left hand of Jesus, but in my mind, there's two options. Option A is that Jesus sat him there, knowing that he was about to betray him, but he still sat him in the place of cultural honor anyways, which is a powerful concept for us to grab onto, isn't it? That even knowing that he might betray him, that Jesus could possibly have been the one to sit him in the place of honor, saying that, hey, even though you're about to do me wrong, even though you're about to hurt me, I still see you, I still honor you, I still recognize you, I still love you, and I'm still inviting you to closeness with me. That's option A. Option A is Jesus invited him to sit in the place of honor. Option B is that Judas saw a vacancy in the place of honor and decided to take it for himself. I don't know which one is true, but for the sake of the conversation today, I'm going to assume that the second one is true because it seems like it's in alignment with Judas's character. The other one seems like it's in alignment with God's character, but I just want to talk about Judas's character for a moment. Judas seems to have assumed the seat of cultural honor at the left hand of Jesus. What's interesting to me is that was a place of cultural honor, but when we look throughout Scripture, we see that the Son is seated on the right hand of the Father, so we see that in the supernatural and in the spiritual, that the place of honor is at Jesus' right hand, so Judas chooses the place of cultural honor, and John chooses the place of spiritual honor. You know what that tells me? You can choose position or you can choose presence. You can choose position or you can choose presence. Judas walked in and he possibly thought, I want to be somebody that when people walk into this room, they see me sitting in a place of honor. I want to be somebody that when people walk in and they see that Jesus, the master, the rabbi, the teacher, the Messiah is sitting at the seat of the host, I want them to see me seated in the place of honor. So when they come in, if they recognize him as an important man, they will recognize me as an important man because I'm sitting in the right seat. Whereas John said, I don't care how people see me. I want to be the one that is close to the heart of God. I want to be the one that is close enough to feel his heartbeat, to whisper into his ear and to hear what he has to say. How often do we choose our seats based on how other people will perceive us instead of how God will perceive us? Are you seated with Christ for clout or for communion? Are you seated with Christ for clout or for communion? I think that many of us, when we show up in a relationship with God, we show up in a place where we want people to recognize our value. We want people to recognize our pedigree. We want to be a leader so that people recognize we have something to say. We want to stand on a platform so when people walk in, they say, that's an important person. We want to carry ourselves in such a manner that when other people see us from the outside, they say, surely this person is a man or a woman of significance because they're seated in the place of honor. But can I tell you, that's not where you can hear from God the most. Where you hear from God is not on his left side, but on his right side. Where you have his ear and he has yours. Where you're not at his back, you're at his heart today. And I want to tell you that you can sit with Christ for clout in the community, or you can sit with Christ for communion with him. And I don't know about you, but I would rather sit in a place where I am in communion with God than I am in a place where people in the community might edify me. I want to be edified by my relationship with God, not by other people's opinions of me. How people sit with you often reveals how they relate to you. Where they choose to sit, how they choose to sit, how they choose to carry themselves, their posture reveals how they relate to you. You know what's funny is I have people come over to my house all the time. I call my house the house of the revolving door. There's always somebody in my house, okay? I'm gonna take out, we got a solid window, I'm gonna put in one of those little glass ones that just turn because there's somebody coming in and there's somebody going out. That's just the way it is, okay? Again, I grew up in Eastern culture. I like people in my house, okay? I want my house full. I get really antsy if it's been a while and we haven't had people over, okay? I love hosting people. I love having people over. So there's always people in my house. But you know what's funny to me? We host a lot of meetings in my house for the church and different things. And so I'm always getting like a lot of new faces showing up in my house. I love watching how people show up at my house. I love watching their body language and their posture, okay? It's kind of funny for me, okay? Like some of you guys are like, man, like you guys are gonna feel so self-conscious if you ever come to my house now. Like, pastor's paying attention. I'm watching. You know what's funny is a lot of times when people come to my house for the first time, I got a living room and then there's a dining room that's attached to it. When people come to my house for the first time, a lot of times if I'm doing a meeting or something like that and there's a few people, like I'll be in the living room talking to people and people are sitting in the dining room. There have been times when people are in the kitchen and they're doing this, you know what I mean? Like just leaning around a corner. There's a lot of times people come and they'll stand up against the wall and they'll stand like this. They're just holding their hands, they're very rigid, they're leaning up and I'm like, sit down, they're like, no. I'm like, grab a seat, no. And maybe they'll grab like a little folding chair, a metal folding chair, and they'll like sit on it and they'll be like this and put their hands on their lap and they're just like, they're very nervous, they're very rigid. And I'm like, oh, this is their first time in my house. They're nervous, they're gonna do something wrong. They don't feel comfortable here yet. They don't know me like that. So they're acting awkward. But then if you come to my house a few times, see, here's the thing about my house. The one thing I told my wife, I'm like, you can do whatever. You can decorate, you put up a flower, you can put up a cherub. I don't care what you do. I'm gonna have a cozy couch because I want people to be comfortable in my house. So we got a cozy couch. You've ever been to my house? You know I got a cozy couch. And some of you guys are like, yeah. You can have it, it's mine. But I got a cozy couch because I want people to be comfortable on my couch. And so what happens is like the second, third, maybe fourth time somebody comes to my house, we're doing a meeting or whatever, like people come over and then they'll migrate from the wall and they'll come and sit on the couch. But when they sit on the couch, they sit on the couch very dignified. They sit on the couch like this. They put their hands on their lap. They're like this. And they keep their knees together. You know what I'm saying? Like subway etiquette, you know? Like they're just sitting like this. They're not spreading out. You never see like a this motion, you know? Like you never see one of these kind of things. You never see an arm across the back like the movie theater when you do the, you know, like nobody ever does that at my house. There's very, very much like this, very rigid. They're very, yes, pastor. Excuse me, pastor. May I please have some water? You know, like water. You're asking me for water like I paid for it. You know what I mean? But then there's another level. That's like you graduated from level 1 to level 2. But then there's another level that few people get to. But I love it when they do. There's a level that certain people, they've been coming to my house a lot. they get to when they come to my house and they don't sit on my couch like this, they flop on my couch. They kick their feet up, they put it on the ottoman. They know the little box that's in the corner of my house that's got Ashley's cozy blankets. They go and grab a cozy blanket, they bring it over, they wrap themselves up, they wrap it around their head. They look like they just got a shower with a cozy, fuzzy blanket on their head. They're comfortable, they go into my fridge, they grab a drink. They know where I keep my sodas in the garage and they just go and help themselves. They don't ask me for water anymore, they go for my good sodas. And they're comfortable, they go to Ashley's coffee maker. You could tell some of these people in here are like, mm-hmm. She says coffee, that's where she's at, you know what I'm saying? Like, they come over and they get really, really comfortable. And what's incredible to me is I know, okay, this is a person that feels comfortable with us. This is the person that doesn't feel awkward in my house. This is the person that doesn't feel like they're gonna ruffle my feathers or they're gonna do something wrong, and they're so self-conscious about their posture with me. They are comfortable in the relationship enough to just be themselves. How many of you guys, you are thankful for the people in your life that you are comfortable enough to just be yourself? You got some people in your life, they can come over and you don't even have to clean for them. You're like, girl, you know how messy my house is. There's dishes in the sink. You can wash them if you want. Go in the fridge, grab whatever you want that's not expired. Mi casa es su casa. Aren't you thankful for people like that? You don't got to put makeup on. You don't got to put your wig on. We know what your real hair look like. Like, aren't you thankful for people like that in your life? Like, I didn't put deodorant on, bro, we good. You know? I'm not sucking in when I open the door to welcome you in. Like, I know who you are. You know me. You know me. I'm comfortable with you. The people that are the closest to us are often the ones that are the most comfortable around us. And the picture that we looked at of the Last Supper, it reminds us that we can be comfortable with Christ. We can be close to him. We can be close enough to touch. We can be ourselves. Listen, you don't got to put your makeup on with Jesus. You don't got to pretend with him. You don't got to clean up messes. He knows they're there. Are you with me? He's aware of them. Can I tell you that that's when you know that you are close to him? Because you can be in the room with him and still not close to him. Being in the vicinity of Jesus does not guarantee communion with him. You know what's incredible is all these disciples sat in the same room with Jesus, but John had a different level of connection, didn't he? John sat on Jesus' right side and Judas sat on his left side. One leaned against Jesus and the other turned against Jesus. But all of them were in the same space. All of them occupied the same vicinity to Christ. Can I tell you that proximity facilitates intimacy, but it does not generate it? How many of you guys know that if you reach a place of intimacy in a relationship with somebody, it helps if you are close to that person, if you spend a lot of time around that person. But there are people that you spend a lot of time close to that you don't feel intimate with. Are you with me? There's some people at work and you guys are like this because you work together side by side, elbow to elbow every single day. There's some people that you work together and you are side by side, elbow to elbow with, and you're like this. Because I am close to you, and I need to be close to you in order to be intimate with you, but just because I'm close to you doesn't mean that I'm going to be intimate with you. Can I tell you that you can go to church your whole life and still never know the voice of God? You can be in the room with the move of the Spirit and never once hear the heartbeat of Jesus. You can take communion as a sacrament and never experience communion as a lifestyle. Because vicinity to Jesus does not generate communion with him. And can I tell you, there's so many of you, you show up to church all the time thinking that your presence produces intimacy, and it doesn't. You've got to lean in for the intimacy. Are you with me today? You got to lean into the heartbeat for the intimacy. You got to be comfortable for the intimacy. You got to be able to whisper for the intimacy. You got to be able to ask questions that other people are afraid to ask for the intimacy. I'm not talking to anybody in this room this morning. John leaned up against Jesus' chest. This is a moment that illustrates intimacy and trust. You got to trust somebody to lean up against them. I love when my kids sit on my lap and my kids lean back up against me and they lean close enough to feel my heartbeat. They do it because they trust me as their dad. If my relationship with my kids isn't where it needs to be, they don't want to be close. One of my sons went through a season of his life where he was kind of pulling back a little bit and kind of pushing away. I don't know if any other parents have ever experienced that, like just an awkward time. And I started feeling bad. I'm like, I haven't done anything. I'm still a good dad. I'm fun. I didn't do anything wrong. And my wife told me, like, you got to draw close to him. You got to meet him where he is. You got to bridge that gap. You got to do it. And so I spent several months just like, what do you want to do, buddy? How do I get close? And just showing up for him on his level where he needed. And after a few months of doing that, we got close again. And he would allow me to hug him again. Are you with me? Because that trust fostered the intimacy. I had to be close enough with my son. I had to be close enough with him to be able to foster intimacy and trust. Can I tell you the difference between John and Judas is that John trusted Jesus and Judas was close enough to touch but not close enough to trust. There's a lot of you're close enough to touch Jesus but you're not close enough to trust him. You're close enough to touch him. Like you're close. When it comes time to give, you're going to give him a little bit because I want to touch him. But I'm not going to trust him with my finances. I'm not going to trust him and give sacrificial where I'm going to have to put my faith in him. There's some of you show up to church and you'll say, hey, is there anything I could do today? But I don't want to give like my time because how am I going to make sure that I do the things that I need to do if I give my time and if I volunteer and if I serve? So I don't really want to trust him. I'm coming to church and I'm going to listen to the sermons, but I'm not really going to put down roots here because I've been hurt at church before. So I want to touch something that God's doing, but I don't want to put my trust into it. I don't want to put roots down into it. Can I tell you that your posture when you're in communion with Christ will influence your intimacy with him? It will influence your intimacy with him. If you are rigid with him, if you are guarded with him, if you are closed off to him, if you won't allow him to be close to your heart or you to be close to his, that will influence your level of intimacy with him. Have you ever tried to have intimacy with somebody that was guarded? Intimacy with somebody that had walls up? Intimacy with somebody that didn't trust you? Can I tell you this morning that when you don't trust somebody, you will never build intimacy with him? And we know that Judas didn't trust Jesus because Judas turned against him. And just a few passages earlier, we see that a woman comes to Jesus and she anoints Jesus' body. And when the disciples ask why she did this, Jesus said, she is anointing my body for burial. And I don't know this for sure because the Bible doesn't tell us all of the things going on in Judas' heart, but we see that there was a distinction that was made there where he makes a decision to betray Jesus. Some people would say it's because Jesus wanted the money that was represented by the bottle that she broke because it was an expensive bottle. But there's also another possibility that Judas expected that Jesus would be a political revolutionary and would turn things around for the Hebrew people away from Rome that was occupying them. And he thought Jesus was going to be some mighty political leader for them. And Jesus says, no, I'm not being anointed as king. I'm being anointed to die. And his trust broke because he said, well, wait a minute. My future doesn't look the way that I thought it would look. I thought that you were going to defeat the Romans. I thought that you were going to be an earthly king. And I thought I was going to have a position in your kingdom. So now all of a sudden, the future that I envisioned for myself doesn't look the way that I thought it would. And I trusted you before, but because my future didn't turn out the way that I thought that it would, I no longer trust you. Even though you claim you know a better future, I trust myself more than I trust you. Is there anybody in here today? And your future is starting to look different than the one that you anticipated for yourself. Will you trust God even when you're in the fire and you never expected to be in the fire because you know that he is with you? Will you trust God that even in the middle of my crisis where nothing is making sense, that he is still good and he is still faithful? Because you can turn against him or you can lean against him. And true communion is found when you are connected to the heart of God. In John chapter 1, verses 18, John wrote this. Long before he wrote about the communion passage in John chapter 13, in John chapter 1, in verse 18, he wrote this: no one has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son who is in the bosom of the Father has declared him. In other words, we don't really understand who God is, but Jesus is in God's heart. And Jesus being in God's heart has revealed to us the nature of God. And we have a revelation of who God is because Jesus has articulated it to us. And then we seek John, understanding that Jesus can articulate the Father because he is in the Father's heart, mirroring the closeness between Jesus and the Father himself by being positioned at the heart of the Savior. So he knows that Jesus is at the heart of God and I am at the heart of Jesus. The Son is at the heart of the Father and I am at the heart of the Son. Because Jesus is in the heart of the Father, he is able to declare the heart of the Father. And because John is at the heart of Jesus, he is able to declare the heart of Jesus. You cannot communicate someone's heart until you've been in communion with them. There are people that you're so close to, that you're so intimate with, that they can speak for you and they will accurately represent you. There is nobody in this world that can tell you what I mean better than my wife. Why? Because she's at my heart. She knows how I think. She knows how I feel. There have been misunderstandings that I've had with people in the past, and she's been able to go and speak for me in a way that I would affirm and say, this is what he meant by what he said. And she is accurate in how she articulates it. Why? Because she understands my heart, because she is in my heart. You cannot communicate someone's heart until you've been in communion with them. Can I tell you today, you cannot communicate the heart of God until you've been in communion with him. And there's a lot of Christians that are trying to communicate and proclaim a God that they have no intimacy with, and you are inaccurate in your proclamation of the gospel because you lack intimacy with the Father. And you are communicating a God that you understand intellectually, but you do not know intimately. Intimacy cultivates insight. If you want to have a deeper understanding of the things of God, you have to live in communion with him. That's why John is called the disciple that Jesus loved. Have you noticed that? Throughout Scripture, the disciple that Jesus loved, everybody knew it was John. Everybody knew. You ever ask your parent, like, who's your favorite? And they won't tell you, they're like, I loved you all equally. They're lying. Every parent has a favorite. They do. We know it. Every parent has a favorite. My mom tells me all the time, I never had favorites, you and my brother. Me and my brother look at each other and be like, it was my brother, you know what I mean? He agrees it was him, I know it was him, everybody knows it was him. It just was. John was the disciple that Jesus loved. The disciple that Jesus loved is also the one that wrote the book of the revelation of Jesus Christ. You guys know the last book in the Bible is not just called Revelation. It's called the revelation of Jesus Christ. Intimacy positioned John to be able to receive a revelation of Jesus that none of the disciples were able to receive but him. He was the only one that was able to see a picture of Jesus on the throne in heaven as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, riding a white horse. He was the only one that was able to see down the barrel of history to see what the end looked like with Jesus reigning and ruling. Why did he pick John to get that revelation? Could it be that John was chosen to receive that revelation because of his level of intimacy with God? That he was the only one that would lean up against the chest of Jesus, would lean up against his heart, that would whisper to him, that would ask questions that nobody else dared to ask, that was comfortable enough to get close. Can I tell you that revelation is not just intellectual, it's also relational. There's so many of us, we want to learn more about God. You want to learn more about God, and it's good to learn more about God. Please, read your Bible, study, listen to podcasts, watch sermons, whatever you got to do. Learn as much as you can, but revelation is not just intellectual, it is also relational. There's so many Christians that are educated but not intimate. You want to hear God's voice? Get closer. You want to know him more? Align yourself with his heart. Because you're going to learn less if you lean into your own understanding than you ever would if you would lean into his. You can develop an understanding and intellectualization of who God is through books and through the word and through studying and all of that, or rather also you can lean into him and have you tell him for himself. Are you with me? You can have him reveal it to you on a personal and intimate level. I want to close with this passage of scripture in James chapter 4, verses 8, because this is the invitation that extends to all of you. It says, come close to God and God will come close to you. Do you want to be close to God today? Oh, I'm sorry I asked, does anybody in this house of God want to be close to him today? Then you got to draw close to him. And he gives you a promise that if you draw close to him, he will come close to you. That there is a reciprocity in this relationship, that when you take a step forward, that God takes a step forward. You hear me today? That when you draw close to God, God draws close to you. It says, wash your hands, you sinners, purify your hearts, for your loyalty is divided between God and the world. You know what this tells me? Is even though I'm dirty, that I can still wash my hands and I can come into the presence of God. And even in the middle of my shame, even in the middle of my brokenness, that God will clean me up and God will allow me to get close to Him. And in the middle of it, as I draw close to God, God draws close to me. Just like the tax collectors and the prostitutes and the sinners that He used to have a meal with, God is saying, I'm standing at the door of your heart and knocking. If you would open up the door, I will come in and share a meal with you as friends. If you would let me in, if you would open the door and invite me, I will come close to you. If you come close to me, that is the miracle of communion. The miracle of communion is not the bread or the cup. It's the miracle that God still wants us at His table. That He is asking us to come closer, that the God who walked with Adam in the garden and dwelled amongst Israel in the tabernacle and sat with His disciples in the upper room is still inviting people near. Near enough to trust Him, near enough to rest in Him, near enough to hear His voice, near enough to know His heartbeat. It is the reminder that through Christ we have been invited back to the table, that we were created to commune. We were created to commune.